we pressed early on for a full-scale investigation, and of course one of the issues was while we were doing that, the evidence from the buildings was being destroyed as we were talking about it, and we were advocating early on back then that the process of removing the steel, certainly that wasn't an issue of getting it off the site, but once it was off the site, because this is of course part of a rescue and recovery operation, once it was off the site there was no real need for speed basically to get the steel cut up into small pieces and shipped overseas for scrap.
The structural steel that would have been key to figuring out what happened to these buildings, what happened to that? Well, New York City accepted a plan 11 days after the attack to immediately start recycling the steel, not even in the United States, where some of it might have gotten saved inadvertently. No, it was put on ships bound for India and China to be melted down.
We were concerned about that, and we understood early on that those are going to hold the keys to knowing exactly how the buildings came down. And unfortunately, we were not successful in getting the elected officials and the powers that be to do that. You know, when it was all said and done, we only had relatively a very, very small portion of the steel from those buildings.
There's about 250 pieces of structural steel that we know of saved for analysis, but out of some 200,000 tons.
There are certain things that really kind of go, yeah, is that true? You know, and then like the calling away the evidence was definitely one of them, especially by a prosecutor like Rudolph Giuliani. I mean, who should ought to know that you don't take away forensic evidence from a crime scene, you know?
It's hard to imagine how at a crime scene you can destroy evidence so quickly and thoroughly and get away with it.
The Family Steering Committee of Families of 9/11 Victims and the American public drafted a list of questions for the 9/11 Commission when they found out that Giuliani was to testify before a panel on May 19, 2004. The very first question on their list of real questions to be asked was this. A few short weeks after 9/11, tons of metal from the collapsed Twin Towers was sold to scrapyards in New Jersey. Thereafter, the steel was resold to other recyclers in the United States and overseas. Anecdotal evidence suggests that the scrap has ended up in India, Japan, South Korea, China, and Malaysia. It is the FSC's position that thousands of pounds of debris was crime scene evidence. It should have been examined, cataloged, and stored in a secure location. Why were the steel beams sold and shipped overseas and not retained as evidence? Was the material examined before it was sent overseas? If examined, then by whom? Were any diagnostic studies, tests performed? If not, then why? Whose responsibility was this? Former FBI Acting Director Thomas Pickard said that the FBI wanted to take over Ground Zero and make it a crime scene, as was done at the Pentagon. If that had occurred, all materials from the scene would have been protected until an investigation was complete. Pickard also stated that you, Mayor Giuliani, would not allow the FBI access to the pit area. Is this accurate? If so, then what was your reason for keeping the nation's chief investigatory team, the FBI, out of Ground Zero?
More than 2 years after the attacks, fury and frustration still seethe and erupt. Audience members, including family of 9/11 victims, accused the commission of lobbing softballs at former Mayor Rudy Giuliani and other witnesses.
It's just unbelievable to me that we're not getting at the issues. This is our last opportunity to have people swear under oath what happened.
The commission chair said many key questions had been asked, just not in public.
Every one of these witnesses has testified at length in private. So if we didn't ask questions here, we probably have asked them already in private.
Giuliani said he understood the demonstrators' emotions, but felt they should be channeled elsewhere.
Our anger should clearly be directed, and the blame should clearly be directed at one source and one source alone: the terrorists who killed our loved ones.
The former mayor testified that in the years before 9/11, the city had been warned repeatedly of a terrorist threat and had drilled and prepared for many scenarios, but not an aerial attack. Would he have taken different steps if he had been aware of the president's daily brief of August 6, 2001, which mentioned hijacking and New York City?
If that information had been given to us or more warnings had been given in the summer of 2001, I can't honestly tell you we would have done anything differently.
In hopes of applying the lessons of 9/11, the Commission has underscored several failures in New York City's response. The lack of a unified command, shortcomings in communications equipment, poor exchange of information among emergency responders, and 911 operators who did not get information to pass on to desperate callers inside the World Trade Center. Addressing some of those issues takes money, and the current mayor said the city is not getting enough.
The question was never asked of the former mayor by his friends on the 9/11 Commission. Answers were never really sought out fully. Audience members accused the Commission of whitewashing the truth and heckled it to ask real questions. Some were forcefully removed. It is my opinion that Giuliani's team assessed the risks and decided it best for him to skip out on attending the IAFF's presidential forum, concluding it best to avoid the opportunity to ask him a real question, like how FEMA knew to be in New York on September 10th, or who at the Office of Emergency Management had warned he and others that the South Tower and World Trade Center 7 were about to collapse, when no building ever in the history of fire had ever before collapsed as a result of the loss of structural integrity.
Now, Giuliani says he had his base of operations, his headquarters, in Building 7. In the morning, he was told, sometime 11 o'clock to noon, or perhaps a little bit earlier, he's told, you should leave your headquarters. And he says this in an interview. I was told to leave my headquarters because the Twin Towers were coming down. This is early in the day. So before the two towers have come down, Giuliani is in Building 7, and he's told to leave. And he says, we were told the towers were about to come down. Now, why weren't the firemen and the policemen told that the Twin Towers were going to come down? How can Giuliani come forward and say, I was told the two towers were going to collapse? What about those poor people who were in there, who were told to stay there? The Port Authority told them to stay there. And the firemen died in large numbers, and the policemen, and the Port Authority policemen, and so forth. So he's told to save himself, and they're not. And then we get to the really serious question, the crime scene. 9/11, the Twin Towers, is a crime scene. The North Tower, the South Tower. Building 7 is also a crime scene. Everybody forgets about Building 7, where he had his headquarters, that came down at 5:30 in the afternoon, even though it is a couple of hundred yards from either of the towers, was not damaged when they came down, was not hit by an airplane, did not have any big fires. It came down in what's obviously controlled demolition at 5:30 in the afternoon, and everybody was told, even sitting in Berlin, Germany, I was told through CNN, Building 7 is about to collapse. Now, why is it about to collapse? There's no fire, there's no airplane. Why should it? It's a 45, 47-story building. In most cities of the world, it would be the biggest building in town. Okay, this is all suspicious. Now, what does Giuliani do? If you've had a plane crash, that comes under NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board. Once a plane has crashed, if you touch any piece of that wreckage, that's a felony. Okay. That's a federal felony. You're not allowed to. Okay. What does Giuliani do? Giuliani says, forget about all that. Violate all federal laws. He's a former federal prosecutor. He knows what he's doing. He says, violate the federal laws. To hell with the federal laws. We're going to grab all of the debris. We're going to ship it to Fresh Kills on Staten Island. And what he's doing here is a cynical idea, because the firemen are concerned about the human remains of their friends who are in here. Maybe I'm more of a New Yorker than other people who've written about 9/11. My uncle was a New York City policeman. My uncle. So I'm concerned about the firemen and the policemen in New York. And what Giuliani does is, first of all, he destroys the crime scene, but then to cover that, he plays the firemen against the policemen. So the firemen say, go slow. We want the bodies of our comrades. The policeman, he goads the policeman to get into fights with the firemen. He arranges, it looks to me, he fakes these discoveries of fire trucks filled with stolen merchandise to try to demonize the firemen. And then on, I guess it's October 31st or November 1st of 2001, he gets what he wants, which is the brawl, the riot, with the policemen and the firemen going at it. In other words, a brawl, a big punch-out between these two groups. And he is able to sit above this. So he is a cynical, operative, evil to the core, knows exactly what he's doing. He is a figure of the invisible government. He is a September criminal. He should not be president of the United States. He ought to be in jail.